Hello and welcome to a lecture on wireless network security. Well, let's get started. So we'll be discussing the different types of wireless communications protocols such as Bluetooth and wireless LAN specifically, the 802.11. And we get into details on how to get the best performance for your wireless LAN and on how to secure it. It's pretty straight it's pretty straightforward. So and what the vulnerabilities are as well. All right. So wireless communications now everyone wants to really have some sort of a wireless connections, regardless their laptops, their iPads, their iPhones. They want to be, the Internet of Things nowadays are going to be wireless. For example, as we will discuss in a few minutes, let's say you're away at a coffee shop and you want to look at turn on your heat from remotely. You do it wirelessly through the um, your coffee shop, and that may be a vulnerability, or opening up your house or whatever. Lock your doors or things like that. So it's really ubiquitous right now. It's opened up almost to everywhere. Wherever you go, some one way or another, somebody is using a wireless device. And the advantages of having a wireless network is that it's mobility, being able to move around, and you're not restricted to, a seat, to a desk. But the big disadvantage really is, your data is in the air, security. So there's been a lot of work within the IEEE committees. By the way, it's the 802.11i. That's the committee that is responsible for uh, wireless network security, the wireless LAN specifically. So there's been a lot of work trying to improve the security, but the problem is when you do a lot of security, it slows down the communication inherently. Speed used to be a big issue with wireless, but now that's been really, I think that's okay, especially with the upcoming 802.11ax. It's going to be 4 times as fast as the 802.11ab, the one that we're having currently, and they both will coexist with each other. The 5G networks that are coming up sometime, hopefully next year, and the AX, and we will need both to be able, and to still be pretty much the same thing. We'll see what happens anyway. We'll be discussing these as we move along. So let's talk about the 802.1115. That's Bluetooth. So please write these notes down for Bluetooth. Bluetooth is used for devices that require very small amount of power when you're in terms of connection. So, and it's the IEEE 802.11.15. Um, it's for short range. Mostly you'll see it in remote controls, headphones, for your phone, where you can just pretty much transferring text, not a lot of bandwidth, within a short distance, maybe 10 meters max. There's the NFC, the near field communication, which gives you a lot of much higher bandwidth, but you have to be very, very close. We use that to turn our cars, turn the ignitions on the car, open up the doors without the need for a key, for example. But getting back to Bluetooth, so it's a wireless technology, 802.11, 802.15, and it is used. Here are some examples where you can use Bluetooth products. You can still be attacked very easily on your Bluetooth devices, on your phone, on your speakers at home. I've heard somebody was able to break into, a Bluetooth enabled speakers and things like that. Um, so the definition of a piconet is when you have two. Typically, while Bluetooth devices are in a peer-to-peer, they communicate directly to each other in an ad hoc environment. That's what I meant. So they don't need an access point really. That's primarily what it is. A piconet is a small network where you have maybe one or two devices communicating with each other. Maybe you'll have a master Bluetooth device and that connects to several slave ones. The slave ones, for example, will be like your speakers, and you have a master Bluetooth device that control all of these speakers. for example. A scatter net is when you have a group of pico nets with connections between different channels. And bluejacking, please write these two definitions down because I remember that these two definitions did come up on the Security Plus examination, by the way. Bluejacking is the attack when somebody sends you unsolicited messages to Bluetooth enabled devices. You know, you're getting messages, stuff that you're unwanted emails or things, not emails, texting, for example. Somebody hijacked your machine and they were able to get a lot of advertisement. Blue snarving is another definition that you should be familiar with. So please write that down. Blue snarving is the unauthorized access to wireless information through a Bluetooth connection. So if you're sitting somewhere, for example, in an airport, somebody may be using your phone to access the internet, not necessarily stealing your data, but using your device to do whatever they need to do, right? They may be able to copy your emails, contacts, or whatever they want because they'll have access to it. But typically, Bluetooth devices, you have to give them a code to allow you to connect. So be very careful when you're doing that. All right, now let's get into the IEEE. The Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers, the IEEE, this is a nonprofit group of engineers worldwide. It's an organization that really holds, for as far as we're concerned, they holds the standards for LAN and MAN protocols, the local area network, and the metropolitan area network standards. Under the 802 series. So for example, 802.3 is the LAN Ethernet standard. You got a whole bunch of different flavors of, there's a Z, a D, there's 802.11D, there's 802.11Q. I'm sorry, 802.3. I'm saying 11. 11 is for wireless. 802.4 is for token ring. 802.8 is the FDDI, for example, the fiber data distributed interface. That's a MAN protocol. The 802.16 is WiMAX. 802.15, as we've mentioned, is Bluetooth. 802.11 is the wireless LAN, and that's what we're going to be discussing. This started out all the way out into the 1997 when they came out with 802.11. It really gave you about 54 megabits per second to 54, 11 meg, probably 2 megs were the actual throughput. 802.11a operated at 5 gigahertz. 802.11g was also backward compatible to B because they operated at 2.4 gigahertz. They gave you about 11 megabits per second. It depends on your throughput, but the big breakthrough came out in 2009 with 802.11n. With 802.11, the connections, you have up to 200 meters as long as you are within the, please write that down. 802.11 operated at 2.4 and 5 gigahertz, so it's backward compatible to A, B, and G. The range is about 200 meters. Theoretically, you could have up to 600 megabits per second. Okay, number 3. Number 4, they made the use of MIMO, M-I-M-O, which means multiple in, multiple outputs. You have several antennas, maybe 2 or 4, sending and receiving data to a user. So that increased the input, right? So that was a big improvement. Then we have, well, of course, the speed and coverage area, the interference was a lot less. and it's better secure. We'll talk about security in a few minutes. Now, I want you to write down about 802.11ab, the current standards that are in use. Current standard, they use MU-MIMO, which multiple user, multiple input, multiple outputs, which means it allows you to have several antennas communicating to one user and simultaneously do the same thing to another user at the same time. That's number one. Number two, you can have, they do channel bonding. That means if there's no one else in your cell using the wireless network, they can, bond the channels. That means you have a much bigger bandwidth. You can theoretically get close to 7 gigabits, right? 7 gigabits of speed with 802.11b, theoretically. Typically, you come close to a gigabyte in your home router, assuming your router and you have an 802.11ab. They do also. We did the multi-input. They take care of interference much in a much better way. The range, it's still about 200 meters. The speed, like I said, theoretically about 7 gigabits per second. So it is really wonderful to have. The AX, which is coming soon, hopefully next year in 2019, it's going to have 4 times the speed. It's not only going to be for internal, it's going to for a high, within a building, you're going to be able to reach wireless connection outside your home, even in your backyard, wherever you'll be connected to your LAN. There is also one more called the AH. This is really intended to be in one room. It operates. Please write that down. I think it's out there now. The 802.11ah that operates at 100. I'm not 100. It operates at 60 gigahertz, very high speed. When you have very high speed, the frequency doesn't go through walls. When the frequency is high, it doesn't go through walls, but the speeds are very, very high. So it's really intent for in one room for gaming, for virtual reality, without having to be restricted to. You get extreme high bandwidth, extremely fast speed. It's meant to be inside a room where you're not restricted to anything. You can move around. But it doesn't go through walls. It's limited when you have if you need to connect from one device to another, you have to run a wire to it. All right, the access points. The access point is an antenna, radio transmitter, and receiver that sends and receives wireless signals. We all know, our wireless router at home is the access point. Typically, we call an access point when you are in an enterprise network. That means, you're in an organization. They have more features, more security features, more connections features, and you can control the power. At home, we call it a wireless router, but it's still, theoretically, still an access point. All right, so here's your typical access point. Here's one thing I want you to know. The 802.11 is really meant to convert a wireless frame into a wired and vice versa. In other words, to connect wireless devices to a wired network. That's really what it's needed for. It has the speed, and so if you already have a wireless network like the one we have in school, and wireless devices want to connect to it, you'll need an access point to connect you there. So if somebody really jams this access point, no wireless devices will be able to access this wired network. All right, so your wireless access point acts as a DHCP. So when you turn your computer on, your computer immediately sends a broadcast message looking for a DHCP server. And your access point will immediately give you a private IP address that you'll use to communicate. Every time you want to get on the internet, go outside, you send your packet to your access point. Your access point or your wireless router at home is running NAT. It will translate your IP address to a public one. You go on the internet. When you come back, it's going to translate you back to your private IP address, and you'll get back inside. Um, so we'll talk about the wireless LAN attacks, such as discovering the network, they're attacks through the RF spectrum, and so on. There are plenty of exploit kits out there on the internet, especially the dark internet. You'll be able to download and have access to WPA secured network. And some of these are free. You don't even have to pay for them. All right, so one of the first things that if somebody wants to attack, the wireless attack, is we do reconnaissance, check out if there's any open networks. So there's one thing that you probably want to do if you think that somebody keeps attacking your wireless LAN or somebody is using your wireless LAN, is what you want to do is you disable the SSID broadcasting. Tell your router not to broadcast the name of your network, right? So nobody can discover it. But if you do that, you got to make sure that you, the device, have the SSID, the name of the network, so you'll have access. That's not 100% bulletproof because if somebody just sitting there with a protocol analyzer, all they have to do is wait for you to send your frame to the wireless router, and they'll be able to capture and know what the SSID is, because that information is not encrypted. Beaconing. Beaconing means your router actually sends out, broadcasts the information. It broadcasts three things, by the way: the name of the network, the SSID, the speed, and what type of security that's enabled on the connection. War driving is somebody is scanning the area trying to find an open network. That's what war driving really means. War choking is really documenting and then advertising location of open network. This is really not done anymore. There's plenty of hotspots, free ones too. So this is really not a big deal. The only problem is you want to make sure that you are connected to a legitimate, secured wireless LAN, right? So here, let me give you an example. Let's say you went to Starbucks and you sat down, and typically you connect to, I don't know, I don't even know if they have a secured wireless network. But if an attacker comes in and they stick in an antenna next to the USB drive, and now their laptop acts as an access point. They set up that access point to have the SSID and everything set up as if it was another Starbucks wireless access point. That's called the evil twin. Another access point that looks like the secured one, exactly the same one, but it's open, right? So when somebody else, that's an evil twin. Why is it evil? Because when you come in and you turn your computer on, your computer immediately will connect to this wireless, the evil twin that looks like the Starbucks connection, and it doesn't even ask you for a key or anything, and you get in immediately. But all that day, now you're going through that attacker's laptop. He'll be able to capture everything that you are doing. And for example, if you have some Internet of Things devices at home and you were able to check the windows or open the door remotely, they'll be able to, by the way, using your GPS to find out exactly where you live by capturing all that information. And they'll be able to know what the codes are. Let's say you opened your door from Starbucks or closed the door or whatever. They'll be able to get to your home because of the GPS and be able to open your door as well. And if you remotely turn on the heat or the lights or the coffee machine or your microwave or your stove, they'll be able to capture all of that. I'm telling you this because I actually saw this on PBS, and they actually did it, and they were able to track the person down, and it was an exercise to show you that they can actually break into a network. So you got to be very careful when you are going to airports, libraries, coffee shops, when you're connecting to these public Wi-Net. Preferably you want to connect to a secured network. Make sure that if it's not secured, you know your surroundings. So when you're typing your passwords, and if you want to connect to an unsecured network, make sure that you don't go to sensitive websites like your bank or your or some or credit card companies to access them, uh, because they may be able to capture all of that data. Well, when you go to your bank, the data will be in HTTPS, but it's still, you don't want anybody to capture your data. Make sure you only go to HTTPS places then, if you are in a secured network. So when you connect to them, usually Windows will say, oh, this is a public one, and make sure they're going to restrict evil twins. So when Windows asks you, are you connected to a wired or to a public or home or work? So you want to say public, because this way they're going to restrict access only to that wireless access point, and nobody else will be able to see you. That firewall will be able to do that. That's why they ask you these, and it's important to do that. All right. Anybody can have a wireless protocol analyzer to capture all the data that's in the air. That's why security is important. Your NIC, your wireless NIC that is integrated in your laptop, can act as an AP, an access point. Of course, most of the time it's acting as a client. It could be a repeater to take the signal and send it on its way, make it stronger. It could be a connection with a mesh with a whole bunch of other NICs, ad hoc, when it's directly connected to another device without the need. It can connect to another 802.11 device, or just to monitor, right? Please write those down. This is important because knowing all of this, that your NIC can do that, will help you know what the attackers can do to access your network. Interference. Interference is extremely important because this is really the big major issue with wireless network. Any other wireless signal can really interfere with your wireless LAN. So if your wireless LAN is operating at 2.4 gigahertz, all I need is to get another device that operates at 2.4 gigahertz that has a higher power, stronger signal than your wireless NIC, and then then no one will be able to access that access point, your access point, because they'll be listening to the higher signal, the one with the higher power. Simple as that. So that's the rule, that if you have two frequencies, the same frequencies are transmitting, the detector will always listen to the one with the stronger power. So that's easily you can interfere. All right, so please write these down so you are aware of which devices can cause interference. Your microwave ovens, so you definitely should keep your wireless router away or from the microwave, because the microwave operates at 2.4 gigahertz. Some of those frequencies leak out and they may interfere. Every time you turn your your microwave on, your network may lose connection. Elevator motors. If your office is right next to an elevator, that could be an issue. Or the wireless access point, you want to make sure it's nowhere near an elevator, because as soon as the elevator kicks in, it's a big, huge electromechanical motor, and it emits an electromagnetic interference. Copy machines, outdoor lighting, theft protection devices, Bluetooth devices, depending on how much power they have. Your cordless phones at home, if you still have them, they all can interfere. The best way to really reduce the amount of wireless is make sure your wireless router is in a place where there is no interference. Try to put it right in the middle of the room or middle of the building. And if you are in the line of sight, that's the best way to do it. But if you have to put it next to a wall or anything, make sure there is no interference around. Not a lot of metal stuff, because the signal bounces off a lot off of metal. Make sure that the antenna is perpendicular to the floor. If it's on the ceiling, it's perpendicular to the ceiling. Don't point it towards the user. Okay, it has to be perpendicular standing. This is the best way to get the best connection. All right, so here's an attacker, an example of an attacker emitting at 2.4 gigahertz. And this guy won't be able to connect because he'll be listening to the attacker because he has a stronger signal than your AP. All right, so we talked about the evil twin, having somebody sitting around with a rogue access point, that unauthorized access points to allow the attacker bypass the network security. For example, um, if this computer cannot go through this wired firewall, well, what he can do is just try to connect through a wireless signal. So if I'm outside and I can't go through the building, I can go wirelessly through the access point and get connection into the LAN. So you have to be very careful and make sure maybe what you could do, and I had a student many years ago download software on their access point and made the antenna a unidirectional, but only in one direction. So it doesn't emit, it doesn't radiate the signal in omnidirectional in all ports. It's just going to do it in one way inside the building. In other words, you could do that if you want to. We talked about the evil twin. So you got to watch out for that. Be very careful. So don't just connect to any open network. Make sure it is secured and they ask you for and who they are. So if you can go into a coffee shop, make sure you ask the name of the network and if they do have a password or not, right? The 802.11 has a committee, the 802.11i, that are responsible for security. So here's what you could do to secure your network. Write the following down. Number one, you could do MAC address filtering, which means you can go into the your access point and type all the MAC addresses that are allowed to get in to have wireless connection into your LAN, right? If somebody comes in, try to connect, and their MAC address is not on the list, they won't have access. Number two, you can disable the broadcasting of the SSID, the name of the network, which means no one will be able to see that your network exists. Your router is no longer saying, hey, I'm here, right? But the signal will be there, but the name of the network is not advertised. But to do that, you got to make sure the legitimate users that want to connect know what the name of the network is so they can connect. All right. Those two, unfortunately, are not, 100% bulletproof security, because if somebody is sitting with with their laptop and they're scanning the airwaves, waiting for you to connect, when you send a frame to the access point, you have to send in your MAC address and the name of the the name of the SSID. They'll be able to capture that and they're going to impersonate you and then be able to connect. So therefore, the third type of security that you can enable is encryption. Make sure your data is encrypted using either WEP, WPA, or WPA2. Preferably, you want to use WPA2. If you are at home, you use WPA2 home. If you are at work, use WPA2 Enterprise. If you set it up. Enterprise meaning you are within the network. All right, moving on. So that's MAC filtering. If your MAC address is not on the list, you will not have access. The SSID is the name of the network, right? The surface set identifier. That's the one that's being advertised. All right, you can disable WEP, the wired equivalency privacy, which was really meant for wired connection. Remember when we talked about encryption, and they take the data, and they XOR it with the key. The problem with WEP, they always use the same key to transmit and to receive and to encrypt the data, the same key, and it turned out to be breakable. So WEP has vulnerability because you're using the same key to authenticate the user and to encrypt all the data that's being transmitted. Um, it was cracked within months when it came out. Then the IEEE people came together and said, this is going to be a big, big problem. We can't do that. By the way, remember this when we did the XORing, when we did the encryption? So you could actually crack this. So if you take this encryption, you get a code. And if you take this, look, this is the encrypted data, right? And if you have another one, you encrypt it. This is an encrypted data. If you take these two encrypted datas and XOR them again, you get a special number. Now this special number XORed with plain text A will give you plain text B. You can try it and see what happens. So you don't even need to know what the key is with WEP. You'll be able to crack it. Never mind in guessing what the key is, because you're always using the same key over and over again. Because of the vulnerability of that, the IEEE 802.11i got together and said they created something called the Temporal Key Integrity Protocol, TKIP. And TKIP, right here, what they did is they had like 3 different keys just to authenticate to get access, and then they randomly picked up about 64 keys. You and the access point will be synced into 64 different keys, and you'll use these keys just temporarily for the session that's open. And once the session is over, if you connect again, you'll be given different keys. So it's a much better secured, right? So even if somebody captures those keys, the next time you connect, they won't be able to see what your data is. And they're different keys, and they are randomly generated. So it's much, much harder to break. That's what the TKIP does. It uses a 128-bit key, much better than the 64 that WEP uses, and they dynamically generated for each packet. So please write what the TKIP is. TKIP also is really what WPA is for, the Wi-Fi protected access. So they have a pre-shared key, the same key just to authenticate, and then they use those temporal keys for your payload when they encrypt your payload. All right, that's what WPA is still, the key sharing is vulnerable. That's why you can actually go out and buy exploit kits and get access to WPA networks. I've seen a student do that about 8 years ago. Not 78, 7 or 8 years ago. It is best to use paraphrases, a sentence that you know when you're writing passwords instead of typing a number. We'll discuss about passwords in one of the upcoming chapters. So this way you'll know exactly how to set up a secured password and what to do and all of that. We'll talk about that some other time. But it's better to use a phrase, a sentence with capital letters, lowercase letters, maybe even some space in between than just typing one word or a number. Now, WPA2, the upgrade to WPA, this is the best. It's uncrackable so far. It uses the advanced encryption standard, which is very, very difficult to crack. It takes over 17 trillion years to crack the keys. That's number one. It uses the 802.1x for authentication. Remember, we talked about that on the last chapter, the 802.1x, right? Where the ports will not allow you until you are authenticated. So it's a much better secured. You got to give your username and a password and all of that, but you will not have access. Can't attack till you are 100% authenticated, right? So WPA2 is the protocol that is being used. I have not heard anybody who was able to crack it. Almost every single device, even old devices, nowadays support WPA2. Only if you have a very, very old router or a device that only supports WEP, then do that. It's better than just having an open network. So with a wireless security, if you want to really be 100% secured, make sure your number one, make sure your router is nowhere near any interference and your antenna is straight up so you can have good connection. Number two, disable the SSID broadcast. Number three, configure MAC address filtering on your wireless access point. And number four, the most important, even if you do the first three, is enable encryption. And WPA2 is the preferred encryption standard that you should use. Okay. There is, by the way, the extensible authentication protocol, mostly used on Cisco devices when you have routers or switches that want to authenticate each other. It's mutual authentications. You send me your your username and password. I'll validate that and I'll send you my username and password. You'll authenticate me too. And once we both authenticate each other, then we'll have the connection. That's what it's really made for. That's the lightweight EAP that they used with the Cisco devices. All right. Antenna placement, like I said, try to locate it near the center of the coverage area. You can place it high on a wall to reduce signal obstruction. If you are in the line of sight, that would be the best thing to do. Home routers, you really can't control the power, but some APs allow you to control the power. The stronger the power, the more you turn up the power, the signal spreads longer, so the cell increases. But you don't want those signals to really leak out of the room, so you can use the knob to really control how far the signal can go. You can use test points to see how far you can go, and without having the signal leaking outside. You can create, by the way, wireless virtual LANs if you want. For example, if you have guests coming into your home, they'll have their own VLAN, or maybe you and someone else can have another secured VLAN in addition to the other members in the house. And you can set up so that your VLAN, anybody coming from VLAN will have priorities. They have plenty of those now. You could do that. All right, so hopefully that was helpful. Chapter on a wireless security, wireless network security. All right, so far we're doing good. Again, don't forget to please do your assignment. It's very, very important that you do your exercises and do them on time. And until we see you in the next chapter, good luck.